Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Hindi Project podcast. Alhamdulillah, we had a great session today with Sister Razia Sultan Hamidi, who is the project manager at Discover You. She is also involved with the National Council of Canadian Muslims in Montreal and spends a lot of her time in youth counseling. We talked about messaging and how we message Islam within our communities, how the quality of our khutbahs. We talked about media engagements and how, both of us have tried to journey our way through that and through messaging when it comes to engaging with the media. We talked a lot about, interfaith and how interfaith can be really fluffy versus being substantive. And there's a lot of really interesting conversations. And we talked about women in the mosque as well. I hope you guys are going to enjoy this. It was a really interesting conversation. Definitely, we're going to want to have her on the podcast in the future. So I hope you enjoy. Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So we finally got this going, and I don't know why there's 100 technical difficulties today. They just put in new batteries, and then it's saying that the battery's almost done. So I don't even know.
Okay, well,
but we're just going to talk. And
if you have to charge, we'll charge it.
Ask Allah to give us barakah and whatever we have left in this, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah.
So Jazakallah khair for being on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Alhamdulillah, thanks for having me.
Alhamdulillah. So, I don't know, we were talking about topics just like a minute ago, and now I'm drawing a blank.
Where do we start?
Yeah. So, you're obviously involved in so many different projects. I know you're involved in youth counseling in Montreal and Quebec. You've also done a lot of media engagement in Quebec. I know about Bill 89, was that what it was? 62.
There's so many anti-Muslim bills in Quebec. Which one do you go after?
Yeah. That was the bill about the niqab.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I know you were involved with NCCM on those projects, and you're a project manager with Discover You, which is Sheikh Mohammed Sharif's. How does he describe it?
Discover You. It's we basically, our mission is just creating programs that help Muslims accelerate in all facets of their life. So we've got visionaries, or our Ramadan program that's just amazing. It's like living a life that is crafted by dua, getting in touch with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's actually interesting because I think a few weeks back on Facebook, a mutual friend we have had shared something, a frustration about Jummah khutbahs, and someone was like, yeah, I want a topic that's not cliche about, turn to Allah. And I was so heartbroken reading it, subhanAllah, he thinks it's cliche to say, turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so I think people are struggling with so much in their life. Everyone's carrying this baggage, and yet we don't turn to dua. Our first knee-jerk reaction isn't dua. We're looking for everything else or some magic formula, right? Yeah. So it's just, alhamdulillah, that's one of our amazing programs that is just, I myself took it years ago before I started Discover You, and it was something that really changed my perspective and my mindset towards just life and dealing with problems. So alhamdulillah, we have that. We've had how to start an e-commerce business, helping Muslims kind of secure something in addition to their 9 to 5.
Right.
So yeah, we're always just we have a garment with Sheikh Yasser Qadi as well.
Right. And that's under Discover You too.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so we work with different partners as well, and just people that help us execute that mission.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Actually, bringing that topic up about the khutbah thing, it just kind of jotted my mind because this last Friday, I was at a different masjid, and so I was giving the second khutbah because they invited us to collect donations that day. So after the first khutbah, which I didn't give, they asked me to give an announcement about the project that we're building, the community center and all of that. So I went and I gave my pitch. And then after it, this guy comes up to me. He's like, you're concerned about youth and women coming to the mosques and being connected to the community. I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, then you just need to make the khutbah better. I was like, there's a lot of young khatibs now, and people, I think the khutbah level is getting better. But that's not the be-all, end-all. It's not the 20 minutes they come for a khutbah. And usually people come late, so they only catch the last 5 minutes of the khutbah, right? That's not going to be a magic wand that solves all the problems. But then this guy just kept going off on that. And at some point, I'm like, I get it. I get that there's so many khutbahs that people feel are not addressing their problems, or are just some imams, we had this conversation we have this Canadian Council of Imams WhatsApp group, which is a group that most of us keep on mute. Yeah, because anyways, one of the actual conversations that have taken place on that group was someone asking, how much time do you spend preparing your khutbah? And it was interesting to me to see the variation,
Wow.
right? Because then I was like about 5-6 hours, depends on the week.
Yeah.
Some shuyukh were like, yeah, it takes me like 10 hours to prepare. And the majority were like an hour, 30 minutes, right? It's like you get what you put into it. So I get that. But then sometimes I feel like people are complaining about it because they just want to hear, what they want to hear. They don't want to hear something that makes them uncomfortable.
So I think that's one side of it, but I do think there's that other side where it's just brutal. Like I live in a city where like all masajids, the khutbahs are in Arabic, like majority.
Right.
And then the ones that do French, and then there's like that little, 2 or 3 that are in English. And, God bless them, they're trying, but it's just, they're not in touch with context. So I would say in addition to preparing for khutbahs, I'd be interested to know how much of them actually research like the reality of their congregation, right? Like I think oftentimes they really are out of touch with what the youth are dealing with and women. And as much as like I know I'm sure like couples come to them for issues or families come, but I feel like they need to, Imam Sahib Webb always says this, right? Like you gotta have, what's the term? Like just having that street credit, right? Like so I was recently that Easter holiday, right? Every masjid across Canada was packed. It was family holiday. Everyone's at the masjid. It was such a prime opportunity, and the imam's talking about. He's addressed youth because he knew they'd be there. But the examples, the references he were using was, they couldn't connect with it.
Right.
And he was talking about youth being, rejecting dunya. And he gave some examples of Sahaba. But I'm like, man, these kids are watching like soccer because we've got an Algerian Moroccan community. I'm like, why are you like mention Muhammad Salah? These guys have got to know him, And like, mashallah, like what's so amazing about him is that he's rejecting dunya. Like he's got everything at his fingertips, mashallah, and he chooses to be true to him, his values, his deen. And I was just so heartbroken that the imam didn't even mention that, and I could see some of the youth like just really tuning out. So I think that's an issue, and I think for adults, our problem is we come to the masjid with a mindset of being entertained. Right? Like we expect to constantly be entertained, like, oh, that imam's not funny, or I didn't connect with him. Well, his job's not really to entertain you here. Take the value or whatever reminder you can get from it, inshallah, and like reflect on it. So I do think we have an issue at adults and youth where we're constantly obsessed with just having that entertainment value when it comes to our spirituality and religious contests, and we have to get out of that. But I feel like it's like that even having that conversation, like people are not even aware that that's what they're plagued with.
Because that's the feeling that I get. It's like they want the imam to be like half comedian and like really funny, and they want to get that entertainment value out of it. And,
but give them an iman boost while you're doing all that.
Yeah, and or some people just, it's not really about the entertainment value. They just want the imam to validate everything they're doing in their life.
Yeah, that's true.
And if you're not validating it, then it's like, oh, these mullahs don't understand anything about our life. Right?
And I think the part you talk about discomfort is big too. Like a lot of imams are scared. Like I grew up in London, Ontario, and I know talking about certain topics, like the sheikh was a bit intimidated too, because he's like, well, half my congregation's buying houses on mortgage, so I can't really talk about that. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, I mean it's like an interesting dynamic, but if you don't make people feel uncomfortable about it, then how are they going to grow? Yeah. So
we're all going to be out with pitchforks on Facebook, like he said this.
Yeah, because it's interesting. I was talking to a rabbi too. He's like Orthodox rabbi. Yeah. And so obviously on the Sabbath they can't like drive, they can't use technology, all of that. So they close their parking lot, right? They have this massive parking lot, but it's closed on Sabbath because they're not allowed to use their car. It's like, but you look.
How do people come then?
They all use their car. They just park on the street. So that's what I was talking to him about. I was like, they're using their car. They're parking all over the street. Why don't you open the parking lot? And he said something interesting. He was like, if I open it, then like I'm validating what they're doing, right? And even if I know people are doing something wrong,
that's a tough one.
We have to make them feel uncomfortable about what they're doing, right? So. Wow. This is like a major debate in their community, by the way. But it was an interesting thing to hear from him, and I was like, yeah, that's right. And then I'm like, because.
So even the silence when we're not addressing certain things in khutbahs, you're validating it.
Yeah. But like that idea that why are we expecting religion to make everything easy for you? It's not going to make things easy.
That's like golden right there. Because no matter what age people are at, it's like, why am I struggling? Why is this not happening? Well, like subhanAllah, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, like how many times, like Surah Al-Balad, like it's tough, like that hard road, you're going up, high incline, but like, you know, we and that's such a capitalist, like consumer, secular, atheism, like mentality, right? Like it should just be easy, and if it's tough, we'll think, you know, something's wrong,
and this like transactional nature with religion, like it should make everything in my life easier, and if it's not making it easier, then why am I using it? Why am I involved in it? And it's like, you're never going to get better if it doesn't make you uncomfortable and doesn't push you outside of your comfort zone, right? Religion demands a lot of you because that's how you're going to become better. But if just because you're facing discomfort, you decide it's not worth your time, then you're just going to keep...
You can't just check out when it's convenient for you. And that's like, I think with youth, like that's the biggest like thing to drive home with them, because so many of them feel like, well, I did this and this isn't working, or I'm still struggling here, and so you know why, like I'm just going to try something else now. So I think it's constantly like giving them that support and reminder that, because they're just being bombarded with like the complete opposite message in every facet of their life, and especially, you know, with school and pop culture, it's social media, right? Like it's just that delusional reality on there, and so if their life isn't according to their friend's Instagram, then they're failing somewhere.
I've been talking about that like last couple of podcasts.
I know, it's you can't escape it.
It's crazy, especially in the context of marriage, because I've been talking about it in terms of like, I don't know, I just had a few experiences with people who are like wanting to marry the Instagram wife.
Oh God.
Right? And it's like that reality doesn't exist, but it extends to everything. Like just that online reality, people are just living in it so much that they can't even distinguish between what's real and what's online.
And I mean, like there's studies that show, right, like within like a minute or two of someone being on social media, like their level of satisfaction in their life will dip significantly. When Pinterest had first come out, I remember I was listening to this interview by sociologists, and they were just like, Pinterest is so detrimental because it's creating a complete virtual reality where they have their dream closet, and they have a dream vacation folder, and they have a dream, you know, house folder, and so you're picking, you know, it's complete counters like what the Prophet ﷺ has taught us, right? Like look to those below you, where social media is all about looking to the grass is greener on the other side.
No, for sure. It's interesting because actually, like, me and Sedma were talking about this when we went for Umrah. Every picture we took of the Haram or of Masjid al-Nabawi, we were like, you take, like, it looks amazing, and you take the picture and it doesn't look as good as it does. And we're like, this is the only time that happens, because usually you take a picture of something and you apply a filter and it looks way better than it looks in reality.
I feel like, because we were on vacation and I have given up. I'm like, Cleo, we can't capture how amazing this looks. Like, just forget it.
But I feel like you take like amazing picture of like, and then you find the right filter for it.
I always feel like a fraud when I do the filter. I'm like, it's not really that. But
I don't know. It makes things look better than they actually are.
True. Certain aspects, without having to be.
But then, like, I don't know, for the Haram, every time we took a picture, or like putting the filters, it just doesn't do that justice to what it looked like.
These poor kids. But I mean, in terms of marriage too, you're right. Like, there's a lot of unrealistic expectations. Like, that's something I'm trying to get into, is just completing my marriage counseling, and I'm, inshallah, like some projects that I'm envisioning that I want to work on, and I'm passionate about helping people start off on that right foot. I think many people are struggling in their marriages, and then obviously our divorce rate is quite significantly high and continues to go up in the Muslim community. And I think, you know, unrealistic expectations play a big facet. We're not focusing on the right things, and we're prioritizing very superficial aspects of what marriage and relationship is. And I think in all relationships, like, people are struggling. Like, people don't know what it means to connect with someone anymore, right?
That's interesting. So I actually did some courses in marriage counseling, and then I was going for a certification, but then I didn't follow through on it. And one of the reasons is that, like, I started doing it, and then I was like, I don't know if I can deal with this, if I could specialize in this, right? Because I was thinking about being like someone specialized in like marriage counseling from an Islamic perspective. This is a long time ago that I started working on it, and then at some point I was just like, I don't know if I can do this, because
It's a lot.
It's
I
a
don't
lot.
mind. I don't
Yeah.
plan on counseling, by the way. I do not
You
want
just
to
want to
counsel.
provide like resources and stuff.
I want to do more like seminars
Yeah.
that are focused on specific phases and aspects of marriage.
But it's hard not to fall into counseling because people.
Well,
will
that's
come,
what I'll have, like my black book list of like amazing marriage
people.
counselors, Muslim counselors in Toronto, and like can I hear?
I don't
go
think
to
that
them.
book exists though.
There's some, but I mean, I just because I absorb people's problems, I can't do counseling.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah,
It's like I
it's
don't
a
want to.
lot.
Yeah, it's tough, and then you take it home.
Yeah.
And then it affects you.
Yeah.
I was talking
'Cause
to a
you
bunch
care
of
too much,
imams, and
right?
it's the same thing, right? And
Yeah.
like it affects their marriages because
Yeah.
they take home those arguments, and then
Yeah.
like it starts influencing the way that they think, and then it influences the way they treat their wife, and then
Exactly.
right. And it's like, and I keep telling other imams, I was like, you need to figure out a support group
Yeah.
with
Absolutely.
other people that you can unload on them,
Yeah.
because you can't take it home and unload on
And it's either you take it
your
home or
family.
you become desensitized and you can become a very cold person. It can harden your heart too, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So I know like my goal is to do preventative measures.
Mm-hmm.
I want to help couples so they don't get to that point where things
Right.
are breaking, inshallah. So I want to focus on preventative, but like this is a whole like topic on its own. Yeah, we definitely lack like those resources of support and just
Yeah.
organizations where imams can turn. I know there's that workshop this past weekend or conference just specifically on like mental health.
Mental health, yeah.
Did you go?
I didn't get to go.
I
no.
really wanted to too.
Yeah,
but-
I saw some of the slides and it looked very interesting.
It did.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like each slide was like a huge seminar on its own.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they were definitely trying to condense it as much as they could. But yeah, we like inshallah, it was refreshing to see that. So I hope we see more of it
Yeah.
in our communities because our like leadership needs these resources. We need training. We need
Yeah.
support. Imams are expected to do everything and anything.
Yeah.
So,
So one of the interesting things, and this goes back to
Yeah.
the conversation about khutbahs, is that one of the reasons why I think that sometimes imams are out of touch in their khutbahs is that they're constantly counseling the
Yeah.
people who are going through
With
really
issues.
messed up situations. So their exposure to the community is often to the most messed up situations in the community. And then they think this is common across the board.
Yeah.
So they get up on the minbar, they think all of you are messed up in your relationships. All of you are like, your kids are doing drugs, and
It's
all
like
of you are.
great. Yeah.
Because they just, that's
You're
their fire and brimstone, and you're all going to hell.
that's it.
Because they see that.
Get your
too
act
much,
together, parents. Oh man.
Yeah. So, anyways, that's the reason why I didn't
Yeah.
want to go into marriage counseling. Because, like, I was
It
like, I
is.
don't
It's
wanna
very
deal with that
emotionally
stuff.
draining.
Yeah.
And
I th-
especially
yeah.
if you're still giving yourself to other parts of the community that do other services, like
Yeah,
that's hard. That's
it's
a
tough.
lot.
Yeah. Even though, like, I did see like the value of, especially this is before even Yasser Qadhi's like a garden,
Yeah.
before all that stuff, to be kind of one of the first people to deal with this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, John Gottman has a lot of interesting
Yeah.
material and try and translate that into an Islamic context. But alhamdulillah, other people are doing that now, so somewhat.
Yeah.
But I see there's still, like, you can
There's
have
still a
like,
huge-
retreats
Yeah.
and stuff like that, where you go through like seminars on this stuff.
Yeah.
There's definitely a big
No, I mean
possibilities in there, yeah.
exactly, inshallah. And I feel like, the need is significantly great.
Yeah.
And we got our work cut out, so inshallah, like just starting that process. So I'm excited about it, and I hope inshallah, like Allah blesses it, I'm able to do it and then work with like local imams and have deliver some of these things that I've envisioned, inshallah. I mean, you looking at like the Catholic Church and just like what they've done in terms of this aspect, it's really great. So I've been just kind of getting some ideas with them, and it's a mentorship as well, and
That's awesome.
with some secular organizations as well. So
So
inshallah.
you do a lot of like interfaith kind of
No,
stuff?
I don't actually, because I'm like of that opinion. If we're going to do interfaith, it's got to be meaningful. Like I can't
Right.
deal with that fluffy. So I haven't been able to get into it just because there's so many other pressing issues I find like in Montreal that I'm dealing with
Right.
in terms of our own community. So I haven't got too much into like actual long-term interfaith. We'll see.
Yeah.
Inshallah.
No, I don't mean that. I know what you mean. Like everybody thinks interfaith, and it's like you're sitting together and everybody's hugging each other and
Kumbaya.
kumbaya and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, I'm not down for that either. I mean, the
No,
last.
and I've seen your
Yeah.
stuff, Ajla. I love it. Like you have open conversations and
Yeah. So that's kind of what I do. Like I actually look for the people who are most opposed
Yeah.
to us, and I try to sit with them. Like I have regular coffee with a young pastor here, Mississauga, evangelical. So he's open-minded enough to like have those conversations and everything, but at the same time, like he's coming from a very conservative Christian perspective. But to me, that's the most meaningful conversation, right? If I talk to somebody who's already like everything's good, then
we're just preaching
what's
to the
point?
choir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
also I think like I identify more with someone who has, you know,
conservative, traditional.
Yeah, or like the theological perspective is really important for them,
Yeah.
right? Like to have strong theological creedal beliefs, right?
Yeah.
Whereas people who are less about like theology, I don't know. I just don't find like there's a platform for a conversation. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because they'll come in with the most misconceptions, the most like, you guys are messed up, you Muslims, for this reason, this reason, this reason. But then when I start talking to them from like a theological perspective,
they're open to it.
They start understanding like very quickly.
That's so meaningful.
Yeah. Like one thing he was talking about how like there's really liberal Muslims, like super liberal.
Yeah.
And then I made an example to him. I'm like, you might think I'm crazy. He said, okay. I was like, some of these ultra liberal understandings of Islam, like to me, are not, from a theological perspective, I want to qualify this, from a theological perspective, are not that different from like extremist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda and stuff like that. And he was like, why? And I said, the reason is because both of them approach the Quran without principles, right? And so both of them, like people try to say that ISIS is like literalist. I'm like, they're not literalist. They're literalist when they want to be literalist.
Selective.
And sometimes they're extremely interpretive about the things that they take from the Quran and Sunnah, right? And I gave him some examples of that. And when I explained that to him, he's like, that makes a lot of sense. He's like, we say in our tradition, like in our religion, we say that people who read into the Bible versus people who read out of the Bible, right? Like they read in the things they want to read into it versus people who are reading the Bible and trying to extract.
We objectify like what we're trying to get out of it.
So he understood that like right away. Whereas I think like if I'm talking to someone who's more secular, doesn't have like strong theological beliefs, they're not going to get what I'm saying, right?
Because they're usually like they come from such a fluffy perspective, and it's just kind of like it just all works, and it's what we want it to be.
Yeah, exactly. So, anyways, it's interesting.
Yeah. No, it is. But that's amazing that you're doing that. Like you're taking on those tough conversations because that's really when we're going to push the envelope, right?
Yeah, and I find that I don't know.
It's one, and it's giving value to those one-on-one conversations. I think we get caught up sometimes in those like big shebang, like, oh, we need this massive like outreach event and this, and sometimes the outcome isn't significant. But whereas having a conversation with a leader of that congregation who is perhaps of opposing views, but subhanAllah, like you probably have had a greater impact than like hosting a massive event where no one really had real conversation, but we shared tea and we told them what we do in Eid, and that was kind of it. Like
the coffee conversation where you're like building actual relationship is far more powerful than just like the event and taking some selfies and putting them on Facebook.
So we really need to get past like that superficial representation of our deen, and I think even as Muslims, like oftentimes we negotiate, there's certain things that are just non-negotiable in our deen, and I think sometimes we try to like be overly accommodating to the point where we even forget like what our message is. And I think that happens a lot in some of the multi-faith work where we're trying to be so accommodating or show them like, oh, we're just like you. And you see this, like I've seen in just a lot of the events that people post and attend, and I'm like, that's like, what was the objective? Like what was the outcome of this? We really have to think long term and not just like for that, like you said, that immediate like PR to put out.
That's interesting. I think that's like a major flashpoint conversation.
We just need training on strategic planning in our community, and even when it comes to like outreach, right? Like I just think we need to always think like, where is this going? Like I think it's really important to be objective oriented and not just like, oh, we have an event and now we have another event, and that's just really great. And even in youth work, like I'm constantly like pushing that. With like MSAs, and I do mentorships, and I'm like, okay, what's the point of this? Like, what are you really working towards? Don't just have an event for the sake of having an event. Like, obviously, there's social outcomes and things can come out of that, but I think we really have to ask, what do we want people to walk away with, and what is the follow-up from this?
But I find that it's a tough conversation because, like, I don't know, I try to be balanced about these things, and you're talking about, we don't want to just fit in. We want to be like confident in our religion, and that's definitely true. But then you get like from a fiqhi perspective, sometimes there's issues where you're like, okay, we can ease on this issue. There's area of disagreement, but then do you sometimes overdose on that perspective? And then the opposite is true too. Like I see people sometimes being like, this sheikh, like a well-known, good sheikh who's strong in his religion, they'll be like, this sheikh's a sellout. It's like, why? It's like, well, because he permits, or he doesn't see as a big deal if a man shakes the hand of a woman and things like that. And it's like, well, okay, but he does have.
I would not discredit him,
right?
Yeah, that's not.
For that. But then for them, it's like because he just wants to make Islam relatable to the society. That's why he has this opinion and stuff like that. That's why he's a sellout. And I read this stuff on Facebook a lot.
Yeah. That's so interesting. So yeah, no.
There's these two extremes.
Yeah, because when I'm talking about comedy, I mean we're just we're not going to talk about anything what Islam really stands for, because we want these people just to see our nice mosque and come drink coffee with us. Right. But no, that what you're saying. No, I mean for sure, you got to take the good wherever it comes from. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. My sister would always say that, right? So you can't discredit someone. And at the end of the day, that's that celebrity imam culture that, the Muslim community kind of needs to wake up from. Everyone's human, and you take the good, and everyone's bound to make some mistakes, right? And we can't just hold everyone at such a high esteem. Every classical scholar, subhanAllah, what did they write in their books of work, right? Allah knows best. There might be someone else who has found something that, I made a mistake in. Right. They were so humble and they were so sincere in that. And I think we need to give that level of respect and forgiveness to our leadership too. And obviously certain things they're gonna if that's his opinion, that's his opinion. Khair, go take what else you can from him.
And I mean there's still even if you disagree with that opinion, there's still some basis on which he's basing it on. But I feel
that's a spiritual immaturity though, right? I think that's a sign of that, and that's why mentorship and having a teacher is so important when we're growing spiritually.
But it's kind of it's branding. Because you feel I don't know, I feel a lot of these people, whether they present themselves on social media as being really religious or not, or being really liberal, neither of them have knowledge. And then it's if you've understood that the concept of being firm in your religion means that you're super strict, then they think only the people who are super strict are firm in their religion. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
And if you think that being, good in your religion means that you're open-minded and you're accepting of everything.
You have to be on one end of the spectrum.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Because they don't have the knowledge to differentiate between what's a legitimate difference of opinion, what's overstepping the bounds of aqidah and our credo beliefs. And so for them it's just presentation, right? Yeah. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I think that's why having a teacher, a consistent, attending a gathering of knowledge where there is someone who's knowledgeable, is constantly teaching and helping you grow in that aspect, right? We're not just watching YouTube and random conference or lecture here. That's not real growth. Because then you're going to bound to make these kind of mistakes in labeling people or mislabeling people, right? So I think when someone can kind of follow, you're going to be like, hey, and then when you have that honest conversation with the teacher and you were to share this kind of view, then you can have someone, if someone came to you, and then you can sit them down and be like, okay, well, let's talk about this. Why would you think that? And are the, there's this backing for this and whatever. So I think a lot of these people often come and they're just self-taught, and they're on their own journey, completely alone and away from any real scholarship or teacher that's attending. And I think that's for anyone. It's so important. So this is my go-to in any talk that I give. I'm just we've all been to university. We have a clear career plan and syllabus of where we want to get, but when it comes to our deen, we're so disoriented, we're so sporadic, and yet we want outcomes, and yet we're questioning certain people who are of knowledge, and you're but you're just man, you don't even you're at a senior kindergarten level still when it comes to your spirituality, but you want to go point the finger at everyone. So I think we really, as a community, need to get more focused on what our growth looks like, and not be caught up in that the sheikh allows, X, Y, Z. That's not a priority right now. You don't even know the fiqh of your salah. Let's focus on that.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, people are addicted to the drama, so they like this sheikh is that, this sheikh is that, and they're just judging and attacking and bashing and criticizing. And
where it's the first thing of any serious student of knowledge, and not even serious student, I would say any layman. Our rule of thumb is first of all, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hates argumentation, especially when it's not even our place to.
Yeah.
So, and that comes with knowledge. Subhanallah, that's when you have that access and just that sincere knowledge, I think, like, alhamdulillah, opens your eyes. And
Sure.
I mean, I went through that realm. Like, I went through, like, you know, when I was younger, and you're just kind of like, the little knowledge you know, and you're just like, oh, yeah, and you start labeling X, Y, Z, and subhanAllah, once you learn, you're like, dang, I made so many mistakes. Like, why, you know, I shouldn't have talked like that to that person. I disheartened them.
But I feel like this is, like, this generation, it's kind of like, I don't know if it's just this generation, but it's something that's been progressively increasing, where it's like everybody's opinion matters, and therefore, and you only matter if you have an opinion.
Because everyone's got a platform to speak.
Yeah, it's like those two concepts where it's like everybody, your opinion matters because you're special, and everybody's special, and your opinion therefore matters, and also you're only special if you have an opinion. If you don't have an opinion, so everybody has to put their 2 cents in, you know, and you know, I'm really grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for saving me from one thing. When I was younger, I probably had opinions that by right now I would consider to be very extreme, right? And Allah gave me a platform from when I was pretty young, like 17, 18, I was giving khutbahs and some pretty big masjids in GTA. And I never spoke about anything other than the very, very basics of Islam. Right? Even though if I went into other topics, I probably would have made a lot of mistakes. Right? But it was one of those things where, you know, it was advice that was given to me as well that I took to heart, where it was like, don't speak beyond what, if you're in your grave, you will have 1,000% confidence that this is correct. So if I'm giving a khutbah and I'm telling people that they need to pray 5 times a day, and that's literally one of my earliest khutbahs was that. Like, I know in the grave I'm okay with that khutbah. There's nothing that I'm like feeling lack of confidence in, right? And now, okay, maybe I'll go into other topics, but this has been like obviously 10 plus years of development, right? But I'm so happy that Allah saved me from that, right? And now I see people like online and they're writing their opinions and blah, 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 and I'm just like, you might regret this in the future.
And you're leaving your footprint, like that's not going to go away.
Yeah, and the scholars always say, rahimallahu, man arifa hududa, that God has mercy on the person who knows their limits, right? So even if you might have an opinion about what those limits are, right, just stay within your boundaries of what you know.
You don't always have to speak. You don't always have to post. Like, how carefully thought out did the scholars like speak, and just even like the Sahaba and like their predecessors, like, you know, we've just like, and obviously in the age of extroverts, right? Like, it's looked down upon if you don't have something to say, or if you're holding back, like, oh, they probably don't know what they're talking about, or they have nothing to contribute. And it's like, we really, really need to get away from that. Like, I feel like it's such a disease. And we're speaking and then thinking or backtracking and even just, I feel like Facebook, I mean, I stopped the Facebook debates years ago because I'm just like, there's no like, everyone's just out to prove the other person wrong, right? There's no open dialogue with an open, sincere heart. So I feel like whenever I see people in those debates, especially on, I'm just like, I want to message them, be like, please save your time. Like, why are you wasting time on this? So,
my thing is, I just like to, like, I'll write, like, the maximum is I just write my opinion.
And then walk away.
Disagrees, they disagree, right? So, but there's been, like, disasters. Have you heard of, like, Dawah Man?
So I'm not familiar, like, I've never actually watched his things, but I've heard, I have UK friends and they've mentioned him.
And now, like, Islamophobes are, like, straight out go to his lectures to take out clips of how ridiculous he sounds and put some on.
And he's still, like, active and around?
There's just one clip. Oh my God, I just saw it.
Is he really young?
He's a very young guy. He didn't study anywhere. But you know, unfortunately, he was validated by certain like organizations and stuff, which I'm sure regret it like crazy now, because he was like this young guy and he was posting like a YouTube star kind of thing, and all these little teeny boppers loved him and everything, and then he just went off on his own, became much more extreme, and like presents himself as like this person of knowledge and criticizing people who are like way more knowledgeable than, like, some of the stuff he's put out there is so laughable. Like, he's arguing with other shuyukh about a topic that he doesn't even know like the ABCs of it. Right? And I guess like if you don't know,
and that's just not the place to do it. Like, what good is going to come from you?
He thinks he's warning the ummah and protecting the ummah, that kind of stuff, right? But like, it's laughable if you have any competency in those subjects, because you're like, imagine somebody's arguing with like an economics professor and the guy is like in grade 8 math, right? You're just like, you're not even on the same plane. You don't even know like the introduction.
That's crazy. Like, no one's talking to this kid. Like, he needs somebody around him to give him a little shake up.
Now like his head is at a point.
Wow.
And it's great. Like there's this one like clip of him where he's like giving a talk in some masjid somewhere. And then like someone's talking in the back, which happens though. Sometimes giving a lecture and someone's talking to his friend. And it's annoying, obviously. Sometimes in the khutbah, someone's talking and like I see them and it's annoying. He flips out on this guy, he starts screaming at him. And then he's like, Allah tells you if you hear the Prophet speak, you have to listen to him. And it's like, what are you presenting yourself as though you're the Prophet?
Oh my goodness.
And like just that lack of knowledge.
It's very dangerous.
Yeah. And I don't want to name people. I don't want to give them a platform. Unfortunately, I did. But like the point is that it's just that concept of people, like everybody has to have an opinion, and then like one of these people get like Allah tests them with fame, really. And
I think that's
a
big danger where a lot of us are, people are just like it just, and I mean those endorphins, right? It's been studied, like endorphins are released the more someone gets likes. It's equivalent to, something like happening in their life that would have brought them happiness. Yeah, that's crazy. And so it's not even youngins, like you've got grown professional adults who are addicted to that social media fame.
Sure.
It's and if you don't keep that nafs in check, and if you're not like regularly learning and connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through knowledge, like you can't protect, like what's going to protect you?
It's true.
So it's you really need to know how to navigate that and have that really strong support system that reminds you of like why you're doing it, and honestly, like I remember watching an interview by the guy Brandon, the Humans of New York guy, and it was just really beautiful. Like he's just like, before I post anything, I ask myself, why am I posting this? It's all about that why. And like when you see the Prophet ﷺ and the way he did things, like there was always a purpose. So even like on Facebook and social media, I'm on very limited social media, but like I'll always like ask myself that, like what's the purpose of sharing this picture? Like what's the purpose of this post? And I think we do a lot of things where we're not even we're not consciously there. We're really just going through, and we just want to create like some kind of superficial engagement. So
no, it's a powerful conversation, I think, because some people will say, listen, like if you're out on social media and you're posting and you're trying to get people's attention, but you're doing it because you're trying to widen your platform and you're trying to use that platform for good, all of that logically makes sense. But then that doesn't mean that it's not playing on your nafs. Right. And we wanted to talk about this anyways, but when it comes to media engagement, and I get media requests fairly often. That's always my conversation with myself, because I'm like, you could be well spoken, you could be well researched, you could be well everything, and you can still screw up big time. And so for me, it's like, if I'm gonna do this, I need to ask myself, why am I doing it? What's the purpose of me doing it? Am I doing this for my nafs? Am I doing this for the sake of Allah? And that conversation, I have to have it every single time. And so there's a lot of media requests that I just won't respond to, because I'll think, strategically, this is not good for our community, so I'm just not going to involve myself in it. Like I've had the New York Times approach me about articles, and I just ignore them. Because I'm like, this is not a good idea, right? And that's a conversation people have to have, because now there's a lot of Muslims getting involved in the media, getting their platforms out there. I know you have as well. And it's so easy for you to just crave that attention and to walk into traps, or to like be detrimental to the community, therefore going against like the whole supposed reason that you're doing this stuff for.
And especially when you so like like whenever you make an intention, like scholars advise, it's got to be before the act, during the act, and after, right? And so like to be conscious of that, but then also I think a lot of people, when they walk into that, it's just like they want the fame aspect, but then like the research or the credibility is not there, and then you're like, when you watch such interviews, and I think our community is getting better at, we do have people who are trained and like qualified and can really speak to that, but I think as Muslims, sadly, like when you're out there speaking, you are not Ibrahim Hindi, who is an imam at Darul Tawheed. Like you are Ibrahim Hindi representing 1.2 billion Muslims around the world, and that weighs so heavily on me. I'm so aware of that. And I remember one time I was doing a CBC thing, it was like 2 years ago, and the reporter before, she's like, don't worry, it's just you. And I'm like, it's not just me. Like people see me, and therefore they will equate me and as a representation for all Muslims or all Muslim women, and that's a heavy burden to carry. And at the end of the day, it is just me, but like I can't be fooled into thinking that. And so I think it's a huge amana, it's a huge trust, and it's not something easy to come by. And I love that, mashallah, you're approaching it with like a strategic mindset, because I think you can't just take every interview, like every media, like, because sometimes they are setting you up and you know they're going to twist things.
Exactly. And not even just like, even if the media, like the New York Times thing, I figured they would be sympathetic and it would be a good article, but then I'm like, I don't want to give too much light to some of the work that we're doing, because then the Islamophobes will catch wind of it, and then it gives them more motivation. So sometimes you have to think about the stuff like 2-3 levels ahead of,
like, we're not there right now
doing.
to bring it out into the spotlight.
Exactly, right? So so the strategic part is really important, and I think like the major issue for me is I try to do as much shoot as I can, especially with people who have experience in this stuff, right? So like if I get a media request, I'm like, okay, let me ask this person, what should I say, what should I say, what should I say? Because you're not going to come up with all the points yourself. You're not going to think about all the angles yourself.
There's a whole team that goes behind in helping you orchestrate that.
You have the same thing, like you get.
Yeah, so like, I mean, when I've done it for NCCM, it's for sure, you know, alhamdulillah, there's talking points that they research and just what angle to approach, and they might come at you with this. So alhamdulillah, you know, it's well researched out, and it gives you at least, you know, so you've got places to pivot if you've got to turn it around. You still, you know, it's honestly, it just comes with practice as well. It's good, at least there's anything there.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay, so I totally forgot.
No, I was just talking about media and being strategic.
Being strategic, yeah. That's like, so to me, those are the two angles, like the strategy part, and then like the myself, and is this like good for me to do? Is it better for me to get someone else to do it? Right? Like that's a luxury
I don't have yet in Montreal. Sadly, like we don't have enough trained people, especially in English media. So when things happen there, and especially because like elections coming up, I'm just like praying to Allah that there's nothing else that we have to deal with. Like I don't get the luxury of passing it up, because it's either like we don't do it, and then there's no Muslim voice that takes place on the topic, and then sometimes it sucks because I'm just so drained. Like as you said, like people don't realize in one day, like there'll be 3-4 requests, and you can tell in some of those interviews I've done where I'm just like I'm so exhausted at that point, and I'm like, what? And it's the same questions, and there's points where you're like, we've got potholes and we've got the mafia running Montreal, and you want to talk about, you know, 3-4 sisters who wear niqab, like really?
It's crazy.
So,
The other thing is that like when it comes to preparing, like people don't realize how much time it takes to prepare, right? I mean, I did that Ask an Imam thing on the radio, and that was super stressful. Because
you could have gone anything.
They could have gone anywhere, And I woke up that morning and I was like, why did I agree to this? Right?
You're like, Allah, this is all
the guy literally chased me for a year. Wow. For a year, he was offering me and asking me to come on. And I ignored him for many months first, because I was like, talk radio, ask me anything. Yeah, right. Like, I'm going to do that. And then he was just like, listen, I'm not like that. I'm not like anti-Muslim, blah, blah, blah. He added me on his Facebook. I could see the stuff he was posting. So it's kind of got like a feeling of what the host was like to begin with.
Did your research.
And then like I went out for coffee with the host and got to like get to know him and everything. And then we settled on a date and everything. And then he was like, listen, I'm going to ask you, he's like, what do you want to do? He's like, there's some questions that are, I think, fair, and some questions I think are like kind of nasty. And he was like, if you want, I'll only ask you like the nice questions. He's like, but at the same time, if I do that, then, because he has a lot of followers and a lot of them are like really right wing. He's like, they're going to be like, you just went super easy on the guy. So I thought about it, and I went back and I was like, I'll answer any question. So just ask me whatever you want to ask. I just kind of put my trust in Allah, because like literally could ask me anything, and it's so easy to trip up. But I tried preparing for like the worst case scenarios and the worst questions, and some of the worst questions that I prepared for came up. So
that's amazing. And I mean, like from the feedback you said, like after doing it, it went really well.
It went really well, and
that's
like
amazing.
And I didn't really care about how Muslims reacted to it.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? I was looking for like his fans and how they were going to react to it.
For them to have just like open access to that, and
that's it was amazing. A lot of them were just like, that was the first time we heard like from a Muslim, or that was the first time we heard from Muslim, like a good representative of his faith and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, alhamdulillah, like it worked out, because that's an audience that doesn't hear our voice at all. And
there's a lot of people that listen in on those shows, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't.
And we could scream on Facebook and Twitter and everything. We're just talking to ourselves. No one's
Absolutely.
talking to
And
those other groups.
and we keep getting caught in that rut sometimes. Where we're just constantly preaching to the choir, and we're like, you know, like that was not going anywhere. Well, we've got to broaden the horizon, but in meaningful ways.
Yeah, for sure.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah. So that's to me that's one of the things that people don't pay attention to. And I did get some requests actually just before we started recording. My sister sent me a message from one of her friends about, like, she heard that segment in particular, and she was like, she wants training on how to answer those questions or those types of questions, because like people at work are getting those requests and asking.
So we need media training, and not just media, like Islam 101 training.
Exactly.
To talk to non-Muslims. I get that too all the time, especially university students. Certain courses they're taking, and they're like, my prof, just recently actually, her prof showed a documentary about Amina Dawood, like, you know, her leading Salah, and she's like, I didn't know what to say, and like they were like praising her and stuff, and you know, so I like walked her through what she could have approached it with, and discussing her next class, and she's like, man, like if I couldn't talk to you, like I wouldn't know how to do this. So we need to help professionals and students just kind of navigate through some of these like Sharia law questions,
and it's so important. And
I mean, like a fact sheet, you know, like somewhere they can go, like FAQ.
Yeah. We're thinking about Yaqeen Institute, was thinking about putting one together,
okay,
so
nice.
that would be good too. But yeah, so some of the problem is that the questions are so many. Like I was at a university, and this sister was like, my professor was like, how can you believe in Islam when it's so oppressive to women? And he gave me a list of ayats and hadith, and I was like, I didn't know how to respond to it. Yeah. I told her email me. I don't think she ended up doing so, but
that's like a common one.
Yeah, but that's the type of like issue that's coming up, and preparing people for how to have those conversations is tough.
But then at the same time, I think we also need to prepare individuals. Like, she's not a Muslim scholar, and that's not fair for the prof to put her,
for sure,
you know, she should be the representative to speak at a like theological or like scholarly level. I think it's important for students to be like, excuse me, like I'm a student and I'm also learning. I do have firm faith, and you know, I can't answer those questions for you, but I don't think you should be asking me. Like, go speak to like the Muslim chaplain that we have, or like go speak to you know, I think like they get bullied into that too sometimes.
It's true.
And I think Muslims have, you know, like I feel like those students shouldn't take that pressure on in certain aspects.
That's the whole thing. Like a lot of it is like deconstructing the questions that you're getting to begin with, and that's what I found really challenging about that radio segment, was that it's like, here, answer this question. It's like, well, I have to take apart your question to begin with, right?
It's layered.
It's layered, yeah. Like even the question about women wearing hijab, and like let's cut that apart and being like, well, why are you even asking this question? Yeah. And then I get comments from Muslims, like some people have reached out to me afterwards, and they're like, well, how come you didn't mention that hijab is fard and Allah said this and all? It's like, they don't care about the fiqhi answer, right? You have to also understand the person who's asking you the question, right? Your response has to be based on, someone in the masjid asks me about the hijab, I'm going to start talking about like what the Quran says and the hadith and the context of the Prophet. That's a different audience completely. They don't care.
That's right? I mean, the person asking that question, I would just, you know, talk to them about dawah, like, well, this is how you prioritize.
Yeah. So, but that's the problem, is like people get hung up on this stuff. Like I was asked a question about handshakes too, although I didn't get any time to answer it. But like the same thing, like it was like, well, why didn't you mention this hadith? My dad even said that to me. But like, it's like, that's not the question. That's not where they're coming from. Most of what they're coming from is like, how does this affect me?
In this Sahih hadith, you learn.
So, but that's the way, like, you know, people want to answer it the way.
And that's why, like, you know, there's certain people who speak to media, and there's certain people that you just do your thing, you do you, but not here.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah, like, you know, you and I still grew up where we saw like those older uncles, like they'd find that one sheikh, and they'd be doing those media interviews, and you're sitting there crying.
Usually it was my dad.
Oh man!
You know, I learned a lot from him. Like actually, I learned a lot from him, from both positive and negative.
And then we get to learn from their, you know, experiences and mistakes.
Yeah, because like he spoke at a time when no one in the community would speak. That was like post 9/11.
There was nobody around, man.
There was a lot of vilification of Muslims in the media. There was no understanding for the media about anything to do with Muslim community. And the conversation was. The conversation was based on just like vilifying us, and they came in with the
and it was always there to set that poor sheikh up, right?
Like, like they came in with a preconceived notion that like the mosques are like terror hubs and we have to like expose them. So it was really difficult circumstances, but
absolutely, and not having media training,
and having like media training and having like And so there was the concept, I felt like it split the community in a way, where the majority probably just was like, keep your head low, stay away from everything, don't comment. If you comment, just be as apologetic as possible. That was like one extreme, and then the other extreme was, my dad, may Allah protect and preserve him. In the terms of just saying like anything that came across his mind, push back as hard as possible, even if it didn't make sense, just push back.
And the poor guy would always get those questions, why do you hate us?
Yeah.
Like, oh.
And but like there's a balance between the two. There's times where you should push back, and there's times where
absolutely. And I mean, alhamdulillah, like I think, you know, with NCCM and like the media training they provided, and we've got more trained individuals out there now, we've been able to do that pushback in a very professional and firm way. And it's just like certain things are not tolerable. And we've seen, I think, alhamdulillah, in Canada, we're so blessed. We've seen that tone, that shift, like in just, you know, the recent stuff with the niqab ban in Quebec. Like, alhamdulillah, the most, like all the interviews I dealt with, like you could tell even just in the reporters' tones, like they saw the idiocy of this bill. Like they're just like, really? You know, so alhamdulillah, like we've made really good relationships, and I think we've just been out there more and educating. So alhamdulillah, like those biases aren't there anymore. Like those shows, like, do you remember Michael Corrin?
Yeah.
God,
even he changed so much.
Is he still around? I don't watch TV anymore.
He's not on television, but like he flipped completely.
Really? Yeah. Good to know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I watched him back in university, and because they would have that, he'd be like three, you know, anti-Islamophobes and like that one poor sheikh, and I'm like, no, someone rescue him. Yeah. So glad to know that changed. But yeah, so you know, like that was. Like we were dealing with, like alhamdulillah, the shift has changed. Like I mean, from I think a decade ago, alhamdulillah, we're making progress. Like, and that's good.
Yeah, there is progress definitely, but
we still got a lot more to do.
Work.
Yeah, I think training and resources is something, and our community is still young, right? And that's the challenge. Like we have so many priorities, so we do have, you know, like resources needed for marital support and counseling. We've got resources in just like still building our messages and having professional programming and support for imams so they aren't doing everything. And then on top of that, you know, you want to have media training and just literacy on how to approach those issues. So alhamdulillah, we've got a lot of fronts to cover.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming though.
Absolutely. And trying to pick and choose like which one to place first when they all seem pressing. Yeah. I can't imagine.
And yeah, I mean, even just like figuring out the balance of.
Mind you, you're still in a community where, alhamdulillah, I have to say this because like most of the people I'm listening to are Torontonians. Montreal has no mosque board that has ever been elected. And there's no females, let alone in an elected board. So alhamdulillah, you're still part of a mosque where, mashallah, like, you know, you're a young imam, you get the community, you really do represent them. A lot of people are just struggling with even getting their foot in the mosque. Leadership and that strategy, like it's so disorganized, and so that's overwhelming because you're like, there's so many needs, and you guys are still stuck on just power trips. So I know that's a loaded.
You just opened like a huge conversation.
That's like for part 2.
Although, by the way, you know what's interesting is when I went for Umrah, so I was waiting to meet Brother Junaid, who's the CEO at Yaqeen Institute. I've never met him before. And I just seen him like his pictures on Facebook and all that. So his brother was bald, or shaved head, or whichever.
He's at Umrah, right? Or
yeah. So the problem is I'm sitting, we were at the same hotel. So I was like, okay, we'll pray Maghrib and then meet back at the lobby. So I'm sitting in the lobby waiting for him. Problem is everybody's head's shaved, so I have no idea who he is. And then this one brother comes up to me, he says, Assalamu alaikum, and I'm like looking at him, and I'm like, I don't think you're Junaid. And then he was like, I listen to your podcast. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. And then he was like, I'm from Los Angeles.
No way.
And so the whole point was that people in America are listening.
Okay, so Americans also deal with this issue, so it's okay.
Yeah. But I don't know, like obviously things in Montreal have always been different. Like I remember when I was working with in Maghreb, and then they tried to start in Montreal, and I was like, why are you guys like so far behind us? And then they were like, listen, the community is so segmented. You have like the Arab speaking, you have the French speaking, you have like.
But you know, like everyone. So when I first moved there, that was what everyone would say. Like, oh, you know, we have challenges because of the language. And it's not just the language, because you've got like English pockets everywhere. You've got French. Like people communicate. They all work in bilingual. Like you have to be bilingual in Montreal.
Right.
You know, it's not that. It's just I think it's a newer immigrant community as well, but. It's just there's a lot of private run mosques, and there's founders of mosques, and they just want to be there, and they're very
Yeah. Well, the other thing Sheikh Dawood mentioned on his podcast, which I found really interesting, was that he was talking about how a lot of the people in Montreal, French-speaking, come from countries like Algeria, and there's like that civil war and all that trauma that they've come from.
Yeah.
And he's like, and because of that, it's made some of them like really hardened and really like hardcore. And that's why people are telling him like, you really need to like lecture more in French.
Yeah.
Because you have to reach that audience more.
Yeah.
And like his approach of, more like compassionate orthodoxy versus like.
But I mean,
some
the
of what's presented
representation
there.
You've got Indo-Pacs and Arabs. Like it's
Yeah.
not like there's Algerians are a small fraction. But you're right. Like they
Yeah.
bring the cultural baggage. That's completely
But I saw that too when I was
understandable.
at Hajj. There was a brother rooming with us. He was a convert brother
Yeah.
from Quebec, and it was like he was in that like really hardcore stage, and he's obviously surrounded by people like that.
Yeah.
To the extent that he did things that I was like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, so when we got to Mina, back from Muzdalifah, I decided on us waiting till the evening, not to go right away and throw our jamarat. To wait till the evening to spend like more than half the night in Mina,
Yeah.
and then go throw the jamarat, and then go to Mecca, do our tawaf, and then stay in our hotels because we had our hotels rooms were available to us. So obviously the Prophet ﷺ, the sunnah was he came back from Muzdalifah, he went straight through the jamarat, cut his hair, went out of ihram, went, did tawaf, came back to Mina, right? So he was like, nope, I'm going to do it just like the Prophet did it. And so he went by himself. And I'm like, stay with the group, right? Like, we know what we're doing. He's like, no, I'm going to do it myself. He went through the Jamarat, went out of his ihram, went to Mecca, did the tawaf, and then he got lost. And it took him hours and hours, like basically the whole day to find his way back to
Because
the
Mina
camp.
ain't no joke to find.
To find it is tough, right? And especially like your particular tent in like a sea of tents, how are you going to find it? So he got lost, and he came, like literally he walked back into the tent and he collapsed.
Your feet give it,
because like he was just like physically just exhausted, and he was like crying because like all the and
it's overwhelming.
He was a guy in good shape.
Yeah.
Like he was really like a young guy in really good shape, but like he went through all the difficulty.
Crazy.
Like, why did you do that to
it wasn't
yourself?
worth it.
He was like, because I wanted to follow the sunnah, and like he basically doesn't have trust in anyone but like the small group of like really hardcore Muslims in Montreal that he trusts, right? And then the same thing like when we were leaving. So we told everybody, like, wake up in the morning, do your tawaf wada', then come back to the hotel, get your belongings, wait in the lobby for the bus, right? And he was like, no, that's too long, because he wanted his tawaf to be the absolute last thing he did before he left. I'm like, you're going to miss the bus if you do that.
And it's a sunnah tawaf too. Like, people don't even realize that, right? Like
no, for Hajj it's
for Hajj, okay.
For Umrah it's sunnah.
Okay, for Umrah it's
For Umrah it's sunnah, yeah. But like, it doesn't have to be like the literal last thing you do. Yeah, just like as part of your preparation for leaving, it should be like amongst the last things that you do.
So did you guys end up waiting then a few hours?
So yeah, he came late. Well, he was lucky the bus was late, but so he made it. But I'm like, why would you put yourself in that situation, right? Anyways, but it just shows you like that mentality of
it's very black and white.
Yeah.
Like there's been like certain centers where like I've been invited for talk, and they're like, no, sister shouldn't be speaking. Like she's not allowed to, and it's like a university setting. Yeah, I'm sure you have that in Toronto. Yeah,
not in a university setting. But
thank God, on the been certain massages, and it's just it always breaks your heart, like as a Muslim woman, because you're like, you talk about these Instagram things. It's like sisters are being bombarded with like YouTube makeup tutorial after makeup tutorial. Like we need to put forward like strong Muslim women who are confident and secured in their deen, who can speak. Not to say that I'm that person, but we need to nurture that, right? And we need to give those spaces and platforms. And brothers need to see that, like what that looks like as well, right? And we're constantly struggling with it. Like we're so, and like, I mean, I gave that recent talk at iLead. It was the topic of like just women in the mosque. And, like that, like we just, Toronto, alhamdulillah, like we have it good. Like I don't, there are like mosques I find overly like they're women friendly. And like I don't think there's very many mosques where you'd walk in and maybe, get yelled at for something or a really dangerous dark back road you got to take or doorway. But there's still there's still just this like overall atmosphere that needs to be created where women just feel like this is my second home, right? This is where I belong. And like one of the things that when Khalil and I went to Jerusalem, like in Al-Aqsa, what that was amazing, is you can just walk into the men's side. Obviously not during salat time. Like, you know, when you just walk in, you're looking around and like the men there just like, Assalamu alaikum, like welcome. And I was just like, subhanAllah, like I didn't feel like I was a criminal for being there. And in our mosque here, like sometimes like, for, you know, the men's space, like for the 5 prayers a day, like usually you got 2-3 rows max. There's this whole empty space, like, can I just pray in the back too? Like, you know, it's just so lonely. Like there's no one in the women's section. And for a woman to just feel like I'm not going to be, you know, getting dirty looks if I walk in this way, or just like that just exercising certain level of mannerism that we show, like when we're outside at a grocery store where the cashier is a female, like men know how to interact with her. Why can't you just show that to my sister, like smile, assalamu alaikum, okay, you know, it doesn't have to always be like we're overly sensitive in our gender interaction when we come to the mosque. And I think it's kind of backfired where it's just made us so hypersensitive that sister and brotherhood that the Prophets and the Sahaba like exemplified. We're so afraid of like even just spreading salam or like having any kind of interaction that we're so disconnected in a very unhealthy way. And so I feel like, like, I mean, with mental health issues, with women just struggling with like fundamentals of their deen, like there's a lot of women who, especially I think mothers, like they're so isolated and spiritually, like they're very at a, you know, very low point and they don't know where to turn. And unfortunately the mosque isn't the place that they think of. And so, like, I think if we had that atmosphere where they felt like, no, alhamdulillah, like my mosque is so welcoming and I can go there just even if, you know, they came for prayer. Like studies have shown like the what is it? The Institute of Social Policy and Understanding, right? They showed that women who attend the mosque have higher rates of like spiritual satisfaction, and like it shows higher levels of community engagement. And I'm just like, subhanAllah, like it's right there, right? We have the research to prove.
So they actually did a khutbah drive. So I did a khutbah on their behalf. They gave like talking points. And I gave the khutbah, and this masjid is, you know, on the conservative side. It's not like a liberal masjid. Although women are fairly active here.
Okay. And that's always the case too.
Yeah,
like women are active, but no, not at the leadership level, sister.
And I was like kind of nervous giving a khutbah because I was like, I don't know how people are going to react.
You're never going to be invited back.
I've done some things in this masjid, let's say, every time I'm like, I have no idea how people are going to react to this.
Oh God.
But it was overwhelmingly positive.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, and like people, I didn't expect like people who are like older and stuff, and they're like, yeah, what you said is completely right. Like,
because they've all got wives or mothers and daughters, and they're like, One
of the things I was talking about was this wasn't in their talking notes, but I decided to address it, was that the woman's prayer at home is better. And I was talking about hadith, I was kind of deconstructing it.
Good.
And then I mentioned, you know, that some people rely on the statement of Aisha, which said if the Prophet could see the women today, he would have prevented them from the masajid, right? So talking about how people have wrongly contextualized that, because most of the scholars have mentioned that this was like, they say min bab al-itab, like she was saying this out of blaming the women or making them feel guilty, not out of it being literal, you shouldn't come to the masjid. And
it was just for that specific time because there were certain things happening in the mosque.
And that she kept going to the mosque the rest of her life. So if she really felt that women shouldn't go to the mosque, she would have been the first one to do it by example, right? But she was meant to make them feel guilty because she felt they were being like over the top in the masjid. And then just like the secondary point that I was mentioning was like, okay, if the issue is fitna, we don't, like women shouldn't come to the mosque because of fitna, they're going to backbite or gossip or whatever. What's a bigger fitna, that women are in the mosque backbiting, or women are not connected to their community, not connected to their religious knowledge, completely disconnected from, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
But who are you to dictate and say that they're going to come and gossip, like as if, you know, men don't do this, right? Like it's just...
But just mention, like, what is the greatest fitna, really? What is the greatest fitna? And then, you know, some people are complaining women are, you know, although it's not just women, but women are adopting these Western understandings and principles and ideals. And it's like, okay, are you helping them have a better understanding of their religion by
you're pushing them further into those ideologies, subhanAllah.
Yeah, so
Alhamdulillah, we got our work done.
But I found that interesting that people were actually in a conservative masjid. People were open to that message, and
that's refreshing to hear.
And that's exactly like from the project that we have is to build a community center, and it's really the intention is to make it as focused for women and youth as possible.
Yeah. But I feel like it has to be community focused because I don't want to lose the men.
But the thing is, the women are the ones who choose where to go.
And that's what I was
So
gonna
from
say.
a strategic perspective, I should make it as women
and that's
oriented as possible.
If you lose women, you're going to lose the men.
Yeah.
But if you get the women, you're right. Because then they bring the families. They bring their husbands. And
husbands don't choose where to go. The wife's like, let's go to this
masjid. And especially the wife's that backbone, right? She's that motivator. Like husband's feeling like, come on, we're going to the masjid. And he's subhanAllah, there's so much strength in that.
Yeah.
And the beauty in that relationship. Alhamdulillah. No, inshallah, I'm really excited to see that.
Inshallah.
Play out.
And even here, the amount of women halaqas, it's incredible. We have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and during the day they have halaqas, and on the weekends they have halaqas, and then they're obviously craving.
They're powerhouses. We need to utilize and build those.
It's whereas men, you're just begging them, please come, please show up,
Yeah, try putting a halaqah together for one of them, and.
So I mean, the desire on their part is there, and it just needs to be nurtured.
Yeah. And then we need, subhanAllah, we need female scholarship, right?
For sure.
We need to nurture and build our female scholars, and our generation is lacking that. We don't need more activists. Alhamdulillah, I think we're really good in that respect. Everyone should be an activist to some level, and have that civic engagement. But we need female scholarship that, alhamdulillah, has grown up here, that gets it and has that traditional understanding and knowledge.
Yeah, and it's important because there's a lot of challenges that women need to take leadership on.
Be their own voice.
Women issues and stuff. One of the media requests, actually I didn't get the request until it was too late, but I'm kind of happy that I didn't get it, was about Mosque Me Too. I think CBC Radio did something on that. Kind of glad I didn't go on for that one. I don't know, it would have been really tough. But they wanted an imam, so they wanted a man.
That's really odd.
Yeah, they had women voices.
Okay, Muslim women voices.
From CCMW and certain organizations like that, but they wanted a male imam.
Yeah.
But I was like,
but I could just imagine the questions you would
get. It would have been tough. I think that would have been a very difficult one to navigate.
Difficult.
But I think in my head, because I was thinking, what would I have said?
Yeah.
I heard the other person who did it, and I was like,
Suck
he didn't do a bad job, but he was in a tough spot, right? I was thinking about it, and because they brought it from the perspective of Muslims don't want women talking about abuse because Islamophobes jump on it and make all Muslims look bad, and it becomes a platform for Islamophobia and hatred.
Yeah.
And I get that, and a lot of Muslims will say that. They'll be they're airing our dirty laundry, and why are they talking to the media about this stuff? And I'm I get that. Actually, I'm kind of sympathetic to that. But if we have no internal mechanisms in our organization for women to get justice if they get abused, if there's no one for them to go to, if the imam really is inappropriate with them, then what option have you left them other than to go public with it?
Absolutely.
And that I think that's the crux. I don't know if I would have said that on CBC, but that would have been the crux of I think the discussion we have to have in our community.
Yeah.
I don't want this stuff going public.
Yeah.
I do know Islamophobes are going to use it against us. But how do you create a structure that a woman has mechanism to get justice?
Yeah.
That she doesn't have to post it online, right? And I think one of the ways to do that is you have women in leadership.
Yeah.
Right? Because a woman might not feel confident to come and tell me about another sheikh who's X, Y, and Z. She might feel comfortable going to a woman.
And it should just represent your community, right? If you have your congregation as women, that should be represented in your leadership.
Yeah.
And much as you said, many of the community projects are often organized and led by women in the mosque. They're doing that frontline work, but when it comes to shura and leadership, they're just not welcome there, or they don't have a seat at the table.
Yeah. So actually, this conversation I've had with Canadian Council of Imams, but I don't know if it's going to go anywhere.
And even the Canadian Council of Imams, I would love to. I was going to say, I think we need to have some women there, right?
So it's been brought up not just by me, but other people as well. But there's resistance there, and
so Ibrahim's going to push.
You know what they want to do? They're like, well, you can't have a woman imam, therefore we can't have women members. We'll just have them on the subcommittees. But therefore, they can't be on the executive. They can't be.
But the title doesn't have to be imam, right?
But that's the argument that I've brought forward. I was like, listen, is this really a council of imams? Because not everybody here is employed as an imam.
Yeah, it's just leadership, spiritual leadership.
There's chaplains,
community leaders.
There's just people who are associated with organizations who are there and have membership and go to every single meeting. I'm like, so if this is really the council of imams, and it's only for imams, then okay. And what if I get fired tomorrow? Am I then therefore not an imam and not eligible for membership?
Yeah.
Like that's a conversation. But they don't have any consistency. So like you can't do that, right? Like either have, okay, fine, maybe you want to have different tiers of membership. You have an imam membership, and that's only for men who are employed as imams, and then also have chaplaincy and also have da'is. There are women who are leading organizations in the city and giving halaqat and giving lectures and are way more qualified than some of the imams on that committee.
And their insight is so valuable, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's be honest. I mean, I'm sure in the circle of Canadian Council of Imams, how many are like really young and educated and get the cultural context here, right? Many
and
still
show up to meetings.
Older, and show up to meetings. There you go.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's good. Like any organization that you see that has equal representation, like you've seen it flourish. Like, let's just be honest here. Starting with like looking at the prophetic example. You know, like we've got to wake up. Like we really like these small things are going to have a massive impact. So I'd love to see that happen, inshallah.
But I don't know if it's going to.
Yeah, I know. We can choose our battles, Ibrahim. You're going to be discredited for the Canadian Council of Imams.
I'm probably on the way out. Blacklisted. Blacklisted at this point. I was probably blacklisted to start with.
I just got a message. Do not come to next meeting.
Sorry, I pick up my phone. It's like on the WhatsApp group removed.
It's okay. We'll get a few and then get your back.
It's funny is the first podcast I did, Sia was asking me about the Canadian Council. I was like totally like didn't want to get into that discussion.
Because it sounds so official, and you think like there's all this awesome stuff, and I'm sure there's awesome stuff happening, but you know, it's like it's more just like this like a support group and like kind of.
It's just once a month they have dinner. That's what happens. Yeah.
We're gonna crash one of these meetings one day.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's that conversation. Do you work within the institutions that exist,
or do you create third spaces?
Create other spaces.
And that was what was actually really interesting when I went to Dallas, because I'm like expecting like, oh my God, like Sheikh Omar's there, yeah, Sheikh Abdul Nasser, like it's just gonna be like their mosque gonna be something else. Yeah. And you show up and like it was depressing. Am I like Sheikh Omar's masjid? The women's section was really like very depressing. I was like, really? This is it? And like their board has one token woman who's the secretary, and I was like, you've got to be kidding me. So like they've got their struggles too, and that it was humbling, but it was also like disheartening, because I was like, oh man, they're like 50 years ahead of us. Like it's gonna be so different. And subhanAllah, it's not. Like Sheikh Abdul Nasser with Gullam Institute, like it's a third space like they've created, right? Like so it's crazy to see like, mashallah, they've got such valuable gems in their communities, and there's some mosques that are receptive. They let them host the programs there, but there's challenges there too. And that's the part that like I'm constantly like just like that's where I just turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and I'm like, give me strength to like understand this and like deal with it, because it's, you know, when you have youth struggling and you have families like being ripped apart, and you're like really like you guys can't like get over your, you know, your leadership and like your issues there, so we can actually just create programming, like we can move forward, because you like there's so much disorganization in mosques. You can't just go and set up a program, right? Like you've got to, like you want to create sustainable programs, you want to create sustainable funding, and if you don't have an organization that is organized and even knows how to do basic management of things, like it's really not going to go anywhere. So
I think we have to and I'm trying as hard as I can to do it within my organization, so I can't really cast stones, but we have to demand more transparency from all of our organizations, even the ones that are young but run by younger people. The transparency is not there for a lot of these
and I think from the past, like the audits we saw in Toronto like a few years back and stuff, that was a wake-up call for our community. Like we need to be transparent. Like
there's all these new organizations, younger ones, and I'm not going to name them, but there's ones that like really need to have more transparency, because
and that's where like brother Jasser Oda, he's amazing. He talks about that, right? He's like just hold back your donations if you're not getting those results. If you don't see like community engagement, like town halls happening, like stop donating to that mosque then. Like demand that of them, right? So I think a lot of us are just kind of blindly like to console our souls, like we donate. We're like, they'll figure it out. And we're just going to be very hands off.
Also because people don't want to get involved. I mean, the first thing I did here was I did like basically a town hall.
Yeah, I love that.
People didn't show up.
They didn't show up.
And I did a couple more.
They're like, what is this town hall?
A few people showed up, but like, you know what I mean? Like,
because like it's so
they're
new
not
to
interested
them. And they don't feel like they'll be valued because they're so used to typical, like, you know, scenarios that they've been used to, and they're like, what? I have a voice? You want to hear what I think?
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
true.
going to take time.
But then I get people like come and they'll complain about whatever issue. I'll be okay. Please come and volunteer. Like I need the support.
Yeah.
Please come help. And then
like, no. I'm just
we just want to criticize from far. So
Yeah.
like it goes both ways. Sometimes you get the leadership you deserve.
And that's very important because like that's just not an old generation issue.
Yeah.
Our young, like our people our age who are professionals and working, like we just want to complain, and I can't stand like those gatherings where I'm like, you got to complain, but it has to be solution oriented.
Yeah.
Are you gonna go do something? Because like I'm sick of hearing those conversations where people just want to criticize the board. Like I criticize, I do for sure, but like I'm there talking to them. I'm like, hey, what are we gonna do? And it's not like I'm not trying to toot my horn, but I'm like, we need to get out of that mindset. Like it's so easy to fall back and complain, but it's somehow it affects your soul. First of all, like it's really detrimental, and second, like it makes you fall further into despair. So we really need to just get involved. Like I'm always wondering, like, where did our generation go? Like we were like those, because we were the ones where there was that peak in MSAs, and we were on that high, and now subhanallah, like we should be the ones that are entering that mosque like community engagement and leadership level, but like we're far and few in between. So we missed something, and we've got to get back.
Something
on
got
that.
missed for sure.
Yeah.
Now I feel like that generation just shows up for like the gala dinners, and that's it.
I was gonna bring that up. I'm like, I'm in Toronto. Oh man, that's like a whole topic on its own. We just want to get dressed up and have the red carpet, and then like go back to my home.
Go back to your job and work and whatever, and that's it. Like
I'm not gonna say anything on this.
Alhamdulillah. Well, jazakallah khair for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's fun.
We appreciate it. I know you're traveling all over the place, so getting some time with you is an honor, alhamdulillah. And you know what, yesterday I was at a gala dinner for Smile, and they do great work. And I was in the buffet line, and a sister in a wheelchair came up to me, and she's like, I listened to your podcast, and it's awesome, so alhamdulillah. Like, which actually made me think, because some people were like, people listen to podcasts are all young men, to the ages of 25 and 40.
Oh, really?
Apparently that's the data.
That's a stat. Interesting.
But honestly, it's not been my experience. Like all types of different people are listening. So
I think it's just nice. You're putting like a face and personality to the community. Like many people don't know some of the shayukh and like just community leaders, and it's nice to just be like, okay, this is.
It's a different platform.
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
Sure.
It's very authentic.
You get different like insights, I think, from like sitting on a podium and giving a talk versus like sitting down having a conversation. Like initially, when people were like, do this podcast, they were kind of like even until now, some people come up to me like, can't you do your khutbahs in a podcast form? I'm like, but there's like a million of those out there. Like you search any sheikh's name, you're going to find his khutbahs, his lectures off YouTube in a podcast form. But
this is so much
This
better.
is not talking to the actual audience, right? Having that conversation.
I think it's you're building this like an authentic relationship with people, inshallah, and like.
It's something a little bit more Canadian-centric versus everything being American-centric.
That's what I saw your dad was saying. I was like, what do you think of the podcast? Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah.
That's a different conversation, though, about how Americans center everything around themselves. And even Canadians will center everything around America in order to... But anyways.
Or measure of success.
Or measure of success, exactly. But alhamdulillah, I really appreciate your time. And hopefully you'll be on in the future.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.